All right. Dr. Brown, I think we are going to start. I just want, first of all, to take a minute of your time to say a few things and a few housekeeping before we give you the floor. I would like to thank you for accepting this invitation. I would like to thank and welcome everybody on the call, and would move on to thanking the sponsors of the Tuskegee University Interdisciplinary Seminar Series, who have been unrelenting in supporting the activities, the thing that in conjunction with my committee, we do to bring some of the best and brightest minds of our own, like Dr. Brown, to come and talk to us, enlighten us, and have us, forge ahead, understanding the battles we have and the ones we fought, the ones that we still to fight. I would like to start by thanking the sponsors, amongst which are the Andrew Mellon Foundation, the Tuskegee University Faculty Senate, whose chair is here present with us, and to whom I'll defer in a minute to say a word of welcome to Professor Brown. I would also like to thank the Office of Students Engagement Initiative and University-wide Honors Program, the National Park Services, the College of Arts and Sciences, College of Agriculture, Environment and Nutrition Sciences, and above all, the Department of Modern Languages, Communication, and Philosophy, my home department. I don't know if there are any of our deans on the call yet, but I want to acknowledge them. Having acknowledged our sponsors, I would like to defer to the chair of the Faculty Senate to say a word of welcome to our guest speaker.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, Professor Brown. We are extremely pleased to have you here at Tuskegee University. On behalf of the Faculty Senate, I would like to thank you, to officially welcome you. I would like to thank my students who are here. I believe your service to us is invaluable. We cannot wait to listen to you. We hope after this discourse of yours, all of us are able to save a dime or two. We are truly honored to have you here, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Isunga. Thank you very, very much. And I really would thank again Professor Brown. And for those who might be wondering, I know the flyer says it all, but I just have to drop in this few lines. Professor Dorothy Brown is professor of law at Georgetown Law School, and she's graciously accepted to come and speak truth to power, right? As she has done in many media outlets. Is it CNN we're talking about, MSNBC, PBS? She has been in all of this. So this series, for those who are joining for the first time, I want to reiterate that it is a series that brings and spotlight our public intellectuals, our writers, our poets, our playwrights, our novelists, our spiritual and moral leaders who help shed light on the challenges posed by the world that is turned upside down on us. As we are fortunate today to have Professor Brown, remember she's a firebrand scholar whose scholarship is taking the US by storm through her research on US tax code. And all her research is geared to showing systematic racism. And we know very well that racism is predicated upon a fallacy that none is ready to push on the side. And today, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you for accepting this call. And please take the floor and take us to that, heaven, that paradise of knowledge, so that we can, follow on your footstep and do greater things like you've been doing. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that kind introduction and the very warm welcome. I'm delighted to be here. My plan is to talk for about 15 minutes or so and then open it up to Q&A because I'm assuming there's going to be lots of questions. So let me just get started. I'm here today to talk about this book I wrote called The Whiteness of Wealth, how the tax system disadvantages Black Americans and what we can do to fix it. And I've been on a journey of writing about race and tax for over 2 decades. I've published many scholarly articles that nobody reads, and I decided I wanted to talk to a broader audience, which is why I wrote the book, The Whiteness of Wealth. And what my book shows is that when Black and white Americans engage in the same activity, whether it's getting married, buying a home, getting a job, paying for college, trying to build wealth, the tax system advantages how white Americans engage in behavior while disadvantaging how Black Americans engage in the behavior. And I want to start by making one point. The IRS and Treasury does not publish statistics on taxes based on race. Let me say that again. While the federal government publishes lots of racial statistics, the Treasury and the IRS do not publish statistics based on tax statistics based on race, which means if I don't write this book, you don't know what's happening, right? Because they don't give me the data. They don't give anyone the data. And I've been using proxies for actual tax return data. And one of the reasons why I'm fighting with Treasury is to make sure that tax data gets published by race. So I will get back to my fight with Treasury later, but I just want to talk a little bit about the research. So take marriage, for example. You may know, or you may think that when people get married, they get a tax cut. Except only certain couples get a tax cut when they get married. Other couples pay higher taxes when they get married. So the couple that gets a tax cut when they get married is a couple where one spouse works in the paid labor market and the other spouse is a stay-at-home spouse and doesn't work outside the home. When that couple gets married, they pay less taxes than if they remain single. And that happens because of how our rate structure operates. It's built in to the rate structure, and you cannot get out of it. You can't get out of it by filing joint return. You can't get out of it by filing separately. You cannot get out of it. Okay, so you get a tax cut if you look like that couple. But there's another couple that pays higher taxes when they get married. Those couples are couples where the spouses both work in the paid labor market and they earn roughly equal amounts. The paradigm of this couple is my parents. So my father's now deceased, but my parents, my mother was a nurse, my father was a plumber, and like any good daughter who got a degree in accounting and was in law school and went to graduate law school to get her master's in tax law, I did their taxes, right? So as I'm doing their taxes, I'm doing my taxes. I'm working on Wall Street. I'm an investment banker at the time. I make as much by myself as my parents do combined. And our tax system is designed so that as you make more income, you pay higher taxes. So I should be paying higher taxes than my parents because they make individually about half of what I make. So I'm doing my returns, I'm doing their returns, and I'm paying more, but I'm not paying a lot more. And I should be paying a lot more. And I can't figure out why. And some years my mother would make a little bit more than my father. Some years my father would make a little bit more than my mother, depending on how much overtime my father made. So I couldn't figure it out. But I knew something was wrong, except I was following all the rules. Well, fast forward, I become a law professor and I actually have time to think about this issue. And I'm doing some research and I stumble across this statistic that says Black married wives contribute on average 40% to household income. Now, you hear this statistic and it's like, so what? To me, I realized I struck gold because even though the IRS and Treasury don't produce or publish race and tax statistics, that single statistic explained why my parents were paying so much in taxes. If a Black wife is contributing 40% to household income, that means the husband or the other spouse is contributing 60%. That couple, 40-60 or 50-50, that couple pays the highest amount in what we call a marriage penalty. When that couple gets married, they pay higher taxes than if they stayed single. So, and most Black couples are in that category, whereas many or most white couples are in the category where they get a tax cut when they get married. So when we think about the couples where one spouse works in the paid labor market and the other spouse is a stay-at-home spouse, they tend to be white. When we think about the couples, the married couples where both spouses work and they work and contribute roughly equal amounts, those couples tend to be Black. And you'd never know it if I hadn't decided to look to see what this issue was. So that's just one example, right? So marriage, that there's nothing in the tax law that says Black married couples pay more, but that's how it operates. So that's just one example. You know, the next example I want to give you is from home ownership. So most people think that if more Black Americans owned homes, they would have more wealth. And that the reason, or at least part of the reason why we have this Black-white racial wealth gap is because 70%, 74% of white Americans are homeowners and 44% of Black Americans are homeowners. Well, my research shows not so fast. That yes, it's true that Black homeowners have more wealth than Black renters. Black homeowners do not have the wealth white homeowners do because homeownership operates differently depending on which neighborhoods we're talking about. So sociology research shows us that if you're in an all-white neighborhood, or almost all white, 80-90% white, your home value is going to be significantly higher than if you're in a racially diverse 50-50 or 50% Black neighborhood or 100% Black neighborhood. In fact, the research can quantify this. If more than 10% of your neighbors are Black, the value of your home drops. As the percentage of your neighbors being Black increases, the value of your home decreases. And how does this happen? It happens because the majority of homeowners are white, and their preference is to not live next to us. And their preference is therefore market determinative. Their preferences rule the market because there are just so many more white homeowners than there are Black homeowners. So when we see that white homeowners are more likely to have wealth than Black homeowners, what does tax have to do with it? Well, there's a tax break that if you sell your home for a gain, if you buy it at 100 and sell it for 300, you have 200 gain. The tax law says that 200 gain is tax-free. Let me say that again. That 200 gain is tax-free. If, however, you sell your home at a loss, you buy it at 100 and you sell it at 80, that $20 loss is not deductible. So you can have gains excluded up to $500,000 if you're married, $250,000 if you're single. But any loss on the sale of your home is not deductible. Well, surprise, surprise, the research shows that more homeowners are in a position to have significant wealth from their homes because they live in majority white neighborhoods, more wealth than Black homeowners, and research shows that Black homeowners are more likely to sell our homes for a loss and not get a tax break because of it. When we sell stock for a loss, there's a tax break. When we sell a home for a loss, there's no tax break. So I always, so people say to me, so what do I do? Do I not buy a house? No. I don't say don't buy a house. I say be intentional. Think about where you're buying. And if you know that so you have a choice. Do you want your house to be a good financial investment, in which point you're the only Black family in the all-white neighborhood and your neighbors call the cops on you when you send your kids to school? They're tagged as delinquents, right? They get expelled. So you could have a good financial investment, but just live a relatively miserable life. Or you could say, you know what? I want to live around my people. I want to live in an all-Black neighborhood, a majority Black neighborhood, which is a certainly reasonable choice. I would then say, whatever you do, don't be house poor. Don't put all of your money in your house because it is not going to appreciate the way it would if you lived in a white neighborhood. So don't put all your money in your house. Don't take out home equity loans because the home equity isn't going to be as high as if you were living in a different neighborhood. I talk about being a defensive player, right? So if the market for building wealth is more likely to produce white wealth, then we have to be smarter as we're trying to build our own wealth. And one thing about buying a home is if you're going to buy a home in a neighborhood with less appreciation, then don't spend all your money on your home. So those are just two examples. I could give you more, but I want to see if there are any questions before I bombard you with any more information.
I have a question.
Good.
Before you ask your question, please, I would just like a little bit of housekeeping. Thank you, Lauren, for putting your video. If you have to ask your question, turn on your video, unmute yourself, and then you ask your question. No question will be answered on a black screen.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
So my name is Lauren Glenn. I'm a second year, and I was confused on the point that you made when you said don't put all, like everything else that made sense. But I got confused when you say don't put all of your money in a house or that depreciating house. Does that mean that you want us to maybe like pay for the house but don't put all of our assets in it? Or does that mean spread all of your gains and maybe invest in like something else and just keep it all spread out so it doesn't all fail?
Okay, that's a great question, Lauren. And what I mean, so let's say the bank approves you for a $300,000 mortgage. Don't take the $300,000 mortgage, take $250,000 or $225,000. Don't max out. Don't go into debt, insignificant debt or as much debt as the bank might give you for a house that isn't going to appreciate as much as if you were living in a white neighborhood. So when I say don't use all of your money, I mean, don't take out all the credit you could take. Don't use all your cash for the down payment. One other thing I tell people to do in that situation, if you work for so what do you do with the money that you're not going to put into your house? If you work for an employer that provides you with a retirement account, put it there. If you have children, put it in a 529 college savings account, right? So do other things with your money that you would otherwise put into a monthly mortgage.
Okay, so you're rather saying have a lesser mortgage, maybe get like a smaller house or something in a white neighborhood versus like a giant house in like a huge black neighborhood. That
Right.
makes
Under no
sense.
circumstances should you get a giant house in a black neighborhood. Buy a smaller house in a black neighborhood.
Smaller house in a black neighborhood, but also try to get the smaller house in the white neighborhood. Just spend less money as you can and stuff like that.
Although, if you're buying in a white neighborhood, the appreciation is going to eventually be there. So you actually could stretch yourself and spend more money, take more of the mortgage that the bank would loan you in a white neighborhood because those the home values tend to appreciate, so you're not worried about being upside down, owing more on your mortgage than the house is worth. You need to be careful when you're buying in an all-Black neighborhood or a very racially diverse neighborhood. Great.
Thank you.
Who else? Okay, so I got a question for the class. I'm sure something I said did not make sense. Who's going to be brave enough to ask me to explain it?
Nobody? You don't have to be shy. Please ask questions. All right, Professor Brown. Since
So
nobody...
what I was going to say is I can now talk about my fight with Treasury.
Okay, before you talk about that, let me just address something because this I've read information about Blacks living in white neighborhoods and owning their homes. And when they do the appraisal for sale, even if there is appreciation, it is not appreciated or evaluated to the same cost as a home of a white. And there is this story of a Black couple who went a long way to get out of their home for a day or a week and allow the white family to live in that house for the house to be evaluated. What can you tell our audience about things like that?
Yes, so we've been seeing lately that there's racial bias in appraisals. So if an appraiser comes to your house and it's a Black-owned house in a white neighborhood, and you have pictures of your family, your Black family members, you have things on the wall that tell anyone in there that you are Black, the appraiser marks down the house. And there's a lawsuit right now going on with a family in Maryland that is suing over this. So what this family did, they expected the appraiser to come at a certain amount, and it came at hundreds of thousands of dollars less, and they knew it was wrong. So they got another mortgage company, they got another appraiser, and they had their white neighbor sit in their house when the appraiser came. And when the different appraiser came, it was like $400,000 or $500,000 higher the appraisal than it was before, and they used that to sue the lender or the appraisal company in having a racial bias. And we've seen the Department of Housing and Urban Development has been making some moves to put this bias in appraisal on the front burner and to take steps, because it's illegal to discriminate on the basis of race in this way. So we are hearing more stories, and we're seeing some lawsuits, and the real estate industry has racist elements in it from beginning to end, whether it's real estate brokers that won't show homes in white neighborhoods to prospective Black purchasers, to banks that don't approve mortgages for Black Americans, but the same profile by a white applicant gets an approval. So yeah, we've seen racism throughout the homeownership process.
Thank you.
So one thing I was going to talk about, I was appointed in October of 2022 to the Treasury Advisory Committee on Racial Equity, and we call it TACRE for short. And our job was to meet and make recommendations to, well, it's a 25-member committee. And I don't know, you guys are young, you're in student organizations, you know, if you've got 25 people, it's hard to get anything done. So what we've done as a committee is split up into subcommittees, groups of 4 or 5 people. We come together, we talk, we make recommendations to the full committee, and then the full committee votes on it. And if the full TACRE votes on a recommendation, then it goes to Treasury Secretary Yellen. So we created this process where the first year we met 4 times. We met December, our first meeting of 2022, where we established the ground rules. And the ground rules are, we can only make recommendations to the Treasury Secretary after the full committee has voted on it. Okay, so December, we get the ground rules. Our next meeting is March of 2023, and we make 2 recommendations to the Secretary. One is about, they're both about data. One is about getting data from the IRS and Treasury to the Census Bureau. And our reasoning behind that is Treasury and IRS show no interest in publishing statistics based on race. But if you can get tax data to Census, Census will publish it. Okay, so this was our recommendation in March. And to say that Treasury is, and it was voted on by the full committee, and it went to Secretary Yellen, and very little has been done. There's been a lot of foot dragging. They've been saying they're going to do it, but very little has been done. And my frustration level just kept increasing, and I kept having more meetings, and I kept saying, when are we going to do it? And then I decided to take matters in my own hands. It started with an interview I gave to NPR Marketplace, where I talked about how Secretary Yellen was ignoring our recommendations. And I did not think, and I do not think, Secretary Yellen is committed to racial equity as a core value for Treasury. I simply don't. So I said this in the interview, and it got no reaction from Treasury, which was annoying, but it just told me that I needed to keep at it until I could find the button that I could push that might get their attention. So I wind up on MSNBC, and I give an interview, and the tagline is, it's a sin and a shame. And apparently it got a lot of views. And I will say, within 2 hours of that airing, I got an email from the number 2 person at Treasury, their administrative assistant, wanting to talk to me. So I realized, okay, going on MSNBC and calling Secretary Yellen out got somebody's attention. So I hear that there's some progress being made, but I won't believe it until I see it. So I'm still fighting with Treasury and looking for any opportunity I can to talk to the press to explain what a lousy job Secretary Yellen is doing when it comes to racial equity. But it's really important. And I'll give you one example why the data is really important. There was outside research, outside academics that got access to audit data, who the IRS audits. And in January of 2023, they published research that showed if you were Black and you applied for a low-income tax credit called the Earned Income Tax Credit, you were Black and you filed for the Earned Income Tax Credit, you were 3 to 5 times more likely to be audited than if you were not Black. That is outrageous. And we would never know it if these outside researchers hadn't done the research. I think our tax dollars should require the IRS and Treasury research. You shouldn't wait until some academic decides to ask the question. We've been lucky, right, that we've had academics looking at it, but the government, it's their job to put this data out and for the IRS to ask, are they discriminating against taxpayers? How do you know if you don't look? So that got the attention of the Senate Finance Committee, so that when the newly nominated IRS commissioner came to testify in order to be confirmed as the IRS commissioner, he got asked about it. He got asked about this, and the chair of the Senate Finance Committee, Senator Wyden from Oregon, said, within 60 days of you being confirmed, I want you to give me a report. Tell me why this has happened and what you're doing to fix it. And about 60 days after he got confirmed, there was a report where the IRS acknowledged that this was in fact happening, that they planned to stop it, and they were going to look into it. So the following September, they announced they weren't going to audit the EITC as much as they had in the past, and they were taking other steps that would lessen the racially disparate impact. And my question is, how do we know that the changes they put in place are actually going to make a difference, right? We need somebody the IRS can do it, checking on themselves and then being transparent and publishing what they find out, right? Because this never would have come to light had these researchers at Stanford not taken the time to produce that study. So who's got questions, comments?
So like, I feel like one of the main reasons that the IRS isn't really doing that, because I heard that the IRS, when you're doing your taxes, that you have to figure them out on your own. But one of the reasons why the IRS doesn't do that for you is because, of politicians and lobbyists, especially things like Turbo Max, those kind of companies that do your taxes, they like lobby for the politicians to not let that pass. I'm not so sure. I'm not so certain. Me personally, I'm not so certain that it's the IRS that's the problem, but rather more people that are higher in power that like benefit from stuff like this.
And I would just say it's the IRS that's the problem when it comes to auditing, because nobody makes the IRS audit anybody. The IRS determines its own policies as to who they're going to audit. And the IRS decided they were going to spend a lot of time auditing low-income wage earners. And they created an algorithm that could find Black earned income tax credit filers like a heat-seeking missile. Nobody did that but the IRS.
I don't know. It's kind of like, it's like when they specifically targeting like low income, like you said, like, but they don't target any like high income Black people.
So what they have been defund. There hasn't been a lot of funds given to the IRS. They have received funds recently, and they are going after high income Americans and auditing them and finding great success. The question that I've been asking is, what's the racial demographics of these high income Americans, right? I want to make sure they're not targeting just Black high income Americans the way they targeted Black low income Americans. And so far, nobody's prepared to answer that question.
Okay. All right. That's just all I had to say. Thank you for that.
Sure. And this year, for the first time, the IRS has a pilot program. It's called Direct File, where taxpayers for free can use IRS software. And you're right, Amir, the private tax preparation services have been fighting it hook, line, and sinker, but they've lost. So we have this Direct File that's actually in operation this cycle for the first time ever.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah, Direct File. Yep.
That's gonna be helpful.
Yep.
Any other reaction? Yes, Dr. Esunga.
Thank you, Professor Ndi. Professor Brown, thank you so much for your great presentation. I wanted to ask about, the same questions that Amir were bringing up. Isn't it true that because of the racial discrimination that exists also in the tax filing division, right? So whether we be from a low income bracket or from a higher income bracket, is it not true that Black tax filers just tend to be targeted more and tend to be audited more than their white counterparts?
So what this research out of Stanford showed was not only, well, it showed 3 to 5 times more likely to be audited if you file for the earned income tax credit, but it also showed a statistically significant difference. And if you were Black and had higher income than the earned income tax credit, you were more likely to be audited than if you were not Black, right? So, but it's really interesting. Most of the study was on the earned income tax credit. And 3 to 5 times is sensational. So that's what the media picked up on. The report, the research that, of course, I read has a line or two, maybe 2 lines, that basically says there's still a disparity if you go outside of the earned income tax credit. And as much as I talk about it, that's not something that the press has picked up on yet. They're like honing in on a 3 to 5 times. And I get it because that's huge.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, but that's why I say the IRS needs to report on who it's auditing. We need to know, as you go after high income Americans, to make sure you're not, finding the high income Black Americans to single out and audit. One of my colleagues, he wrote a piece, Filing While Black, and he talks about how the tax system disadvantages Black Americans. And we don't, we think that, oh, it can't possibly, for example, if you think about your tax return, there's nothing on your tax return that has you check a race box. So what the criticism I often get is, well, it can't have anything to do with race because they don't know your race when they check a box. But guess what they know on your tax return? Zip code, first name, last name. We live in a racially segregated society. If you give me state, city, zip code, first and last name, that's all social scientists need to research and impute race. So it's just silly to think that this happens by accident. And for the longest time, the IRS, and the former commissioner, Charles Reddick, testified before Congress, and I think 2020, and he said, we do not discriminate on the basis of race. He says this in front of the camera. And after the hearing is over, Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio asks several follow-up questions, like, you say you don't collect tax return data by race, so how then can you say you don't discriminate on the basis of race? And the commissioner had to concede, well, I don't know. I don't know. But in front of the camera, he was adamant, we don't discriminate. But when they followed up and the camera wasn't on, he has to admit, well, I don't know that. So the best thing that ever happened was we had a new nominee, Danny Werfel, to be IRS commissioner while this Stanford research was getting all this attention. And the Democrats controlled the Senate such that the chairman and other senators asked about it and required a report back.
I'm
So
sorry,
what's
this
the
will be my last question, Professor
I was
Brown.
going to say, so the adage is, would I rather be lucky than smart? I think I might rather be lucky. And in this instance, we all got lucky in terms of timing with the Stanford research and the IRS commissioner being nominated and going through a confirmation hearing while this audit disparity was swirling around in the air.
Yes, ma'am. We got lucky indeed. My last question. So to your expert opinion, would you advise us Black tax filers maybe to use an accredited service such as I don't know, some reputed, some well known tax service preparer that can, instead of us signing off, that the tax preparer will sign off, right? And maybe would that be a way for us to avoid being audited? Right? I'm not sure whether I'm saying this properly. Like maybe if we had a CPA, right, prepare our taxes, would that maybe reduce the incidence of us being audited?
I think I don't know. I think a lot of people that are audited have tax return preparers signing their returns, right? So the easy answer is that's a great empirical question. I don't have the answer, but from what I'm hearing, a lot of people that are audited have representation. So I don't know that that would fix it. Honestly, I'm under the sunshine is the best disinfectant rule. So I think the IRS needs to be required to publish audit statistics by zip code so that we could have a sense of who's being audited, so that we could see if some neighborhoods are being targeted compared with other neighborhoods, and that members of Congress could see which districts are being targeted and then apply more pressure to the IRS. That was one of the recommendations that the Treasury Advisory Committee made. And it's my understanding that the IRS will never do it because they understand the heat that would bring. But we need more heat.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And ask questions. The audience, I expect you to, I promised you come with questions. Please take the opportunity, ask the questions now.
I got a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Okay, so us as college students, so you recommend that we, of course, with this information, we apply what we've learned to put more pressure on helping them release audits based on zip code, so then we can pressure different counties or different parts to like say, hey, this is systematically racist against us. And then what then? What do you expect would happen if this happens? Maybe short term or long term?
I'd expect once the information became public, the IRS would have to change what they're doing because they would get so much pushback from members of Congress whose voters were getting audited for no reason. Because we have no reason to think there's any more fraud in zip code X than zip code Y. There's absolutely no reason for it. So if you're auditing a certain neighborhood, a certain county, why are you doing that? Usually, or at least I think it's being done because of stereotypes, because of racism, because people think that all Black people want to do is cheat the government, when really the people cheating the government are white people, white taxpayers, but they're not getting looked at. So I think the transparency of the data, honestly, I think if the IRS knew it had to publish these statistics, they would change their behavior. That's what would happen.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If questions are not coming, then I'll start calling out people to ask questions. Is that what we want?
That's what I do in class.
Okay, there is a comment on the.
Oh, we have a question.
Okay.
Shanti?
Hi, my name is Ashanti Thomas. I got a question for you. So, like, as you were talking about how we are like targeted when it comes to our taxes and like where we are, like as college students, like filing taxes and everything, like I file as a dependent on my own. So, like, is there anything that I need to know or pay attention to specifically while filing my taxes?
I don't, the easy answer is I don't know. I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but filing taxes, that's step one. So yeah, no, there's nothing that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay.
Okay. All right, if not, I was about to read a comment on the chat from Mary M, who says, thank you very much, Professor Brown. I'm in Canada and I am pretty sure the same thing is happening here. Nothing happens by accident. The law says one thing, but there is a big disparity between theory and practice. Financial literacy is a must. we have to comprehend the world of money, finance, and investment. Thank you much for creating awareness and your untiring push for financial empowerment.
Thank you.
So no questions?
Okay, here's a question. Oh, wait, we're not answering. We can't answer a question if they don't go on camera, right, Professor?
Yes.
Nice try, Darren.
Darren, turn on your camera.
May I ask a question?
Hello?
Yes, there's Darren.
My question was, do you think that the government knows the injustice that they're doing and they just don't care about what's going on?
Honestly, I think the IRS knows how bad it is. And I think they don't want to deal with it because they know how bad it is. And I think Treasury is complicit as well. I honestly think the reason why I'm having to fight, the Treasury Advisory Committee is having to fight, because they don't want this information out, because they actually have a gut instinct as to how bad it is. Because people don't fight to prevent data that makes them look good. They fight to prevent the publication of data that makes them look bad. And I think they know it. I think as bad as I think it is, I think it's worse. And I think they know it. Which is why I just won't quit.
Thank you.
Hello, may I ask a question, please? Can you hear me
Yeah.
all?
Yes,
Yes.
go right
Okay.
ahead.
Hi, just really quickly, I'm working on something now that talks about issues about the publishing industry, and perhaps there's not the right enough good quality stuff written about Black and brown people, because there are not all that many Black and brown people who work in the publishing industry. I have no idea what the answer will be, but how many people of color work at the IRS?
Yeah, so, the easy answer is the IRS publishes workforce statistics by race. They will tell you who works there by race, and they're relatively proud of those stats. So in terms of the racial diversity at the IRS, it's not bad. I'm blanking on the exact numbers, but it's actually not bad. However, when you see, I think many of the positions are not, they're lower to middle and not middle to upper, right? So we need people in decision-making power at the head of the organization. We need people in decision-making power at the manager level. But I will say this, the IRS has better race workforce data than Treasury.
Right.
Treasury cannot, because I asked for it, cannot give you race data.
Mhm.
And of course they can, but they won't because it's that bad.
What about the issue of auditing and people that are auditors? Do you know anything about that?
I don't.
Mhm. Okay. Well, the parallel struck me as we were going along, and I I'm not very surprised, but I am saddened by all this.
Yes.
Okay.
This will be my last question, Professor, if I may.
Please keep the conversation questions coming.
Professor Brown, first thing, we will not let you go before you give us one tip on how to save on our tax burden, right? First thing. Second, will you say, right, going along with what Dr. Fishkin said, that if maybe we had more Black people who were like you, who understood the game, right, will it make it maybe a little bit less painful for us? Will we
So,
maybe have, yes, please.
so here's my response. I could not do this if I worked at the IRS or Treasury, I'd lose my job. In fact, the first study that hinted at or showed racial disparities in geography was published by an IRS economist after he retired. People, it's hard to change a system from within, especially when your job is dependent upon that system. So it would be more likely that you would find people that went to the IRS wide-eyed and full of promise, but got turned before they left because the system is designed to shut that down. I actually, if we're going to have change, it would come from the top. It would come from somebody like me being appointed IRS commissioner. Now, to be clear, I want no such job. I love my job. I am a tenured academic, which is the best job on the planet. Okay. But you would need somebody who said, this is my mission, and got the support of Treasury, the president, right? Everybody on board saying we're going to fix it from top to bottom. So the odds are this change wouldn't come from within, because if, let's say you are a Black auditor and you decide you want to audit white people, not Black people. If the system is set up for you to audit Black people, they'll fire you. They'll not promote you. They'll marginalize you. They'll fix it so that you cannot do what it is you want to do. Okay. In terms of the one tip, so let's go back to marriage. So let's say you're going to get married and you and your partner earn roughly equal amounts. Whatever you do, don't get married on New Year's Eve. Wait till New Year's Day. Why am I saying that? Because if you get married on New Year's Eve, you are married on the last day of, let's say, 2023. And you will be paying a higher tax burden when your taxes come due in April of 2024. If, however, you wait until January 1 of 2024, you would each file as single in 2023 and not pay a penalty. Yes, you would pay a penalty for being married in 2024, but those taxes wouldn't be due until April 2025. So you would delay 1 year the extra taxes. So that's my tax tip. I once gave this talk I taught at Emory Law before I came to Georgetown. I once gave this talk and one of my students said, Professor Brown, are you saying we shouldn't get married? I said, do not go home and tell your mama I said not to get married, okay? No, I'm not saying that. Just, you don't need the New Year's Eve wedding if you can have it New Year's Day and pay less taxes for the earlier year.
I did see two people wanting to say something. Darren or
Oh, I
Leila,
had a question.
are you available?
I had a question. My question was like, do you think the auditors, like in other government agencies, have to sign have to go through clearance and sign NDAs? So even if they wanted to say certain stuff, they wouldn't be allowed to.
I honestly don't know that they have to sign NDAs. I think the pressure to keep a job, especially if you're a breadwinner, you've got children at home you have to feed, I think that would be enough without an NDA, with you keeping quiet. But you know, it's possible. I just don't think the typical government employee signs an NDA. And they don't have to, because you know, they might want to get promoted. They might want to get a raise. There are all kinds of ways to control behavior without the NDA.
Wow. All right.
Our hour is almost up.
Yes, I just would like to read a comment from Miss Harris Leila, who says, I just love the Black excellence in here. I enjoy how informative each and everyone is, especially the responses. Those are your responses.
Thank you.
So let's take a few more questions before we round up. Amira, you have a question?
I'm And I'm more just asking because my mom always mentions about us like investing our generational wealth into like having multiple homes, like renting out housing and stuff like that. Do you think that like Black households or Black families that do have multiple homes and are renting out housing facilities, like are they penalized more on taxes for like, you know, having multiple sources of income when it comes to housing?
You know, I don't think having multiple houses is going to penalize anyone. You just want to make sure that those houses are profitable so you don't wind up losing money on them. But there are tax breaks associated with rental property. So no, I don't think you're disadvantaged by doing that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's just hold 1 second. I think I'll try to unmute Miss Harris. She very much wants to say something. Can you try to unmute yourself now, Miss Harris? All right, come on your video and let us see you.
I'm not hearing anything.
Okay. Now we can hear you. Well, that's technology for us.
Yes. Well, this has been terrific.
No, it's been wonderful. I just wanted Miss Harris, because she really wants to say something, and we'll try to give her a few seconds to come in, because our thing is still showing connecting. However, while we are hoping she comes on, Professor Brown, I really cannot thank you enough. On behalf of everybody on the call, on behalf of the Tuskegee University Interdisciplinary Seminar Series, saying thank you is not enough, because from your fount of wisdom, we've been able to refresh our souls, souls that have been thirsty and deprived of taxation equity in this country for the longest time ever. I know in this busy world, for you to find an hour of your time to sacrifice, it speaks to the commitment you have. For us, fending off the oppression that is invisible, or that presses its invisible hands on us. And I just want to say thank you. If there is any last commentary or reflection, you will give it. But before you give that, I just want to tell everybody on the call, and I need all of you to unmute and give Professor Brown a big TU thank you. Unmute before we do that. Everybody, I want to see you guys unmute, please. TU.
You
No, you could do better. You could do better. This is Professor Brown. TU. Okay, that's a little bit better. Thank you. So, Professor Brown, give us
Thank
any
you.
last word of reflection before.
It's been my pleasure. I want you guys to, go out and change the world so that it's a better place for those coming behind you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you very much. You have a blessed and wonderful one.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Welcome. Cheers.